Hello there, everybody. It's Tom here. Let me back up here with all this knife stuff that I do and everybody else does and everything. Now, the reason why I'm not doing the bushcrafting stuff and whatnot like I used to do is because I just can't. And I don't want to play stupid and make you seem stupid by telling you, hey, blah, 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 blah. And I'm not doing it. So, although I do know what I have and know what I'm doing with what I have, I can't show you because I can't get out there to do it. So maybe with all these operations that's coming up this year, there's like three more of them or two more of them. Who knows? Yeah. So anyway, when I was a young man, say early 70s area, yeah, I was thinking about it sitting here, and I did not see a whole lot of fixed blade knives on people's belts. And I even loved knives back then. People would go to the hardware store and gaga over the guns. I used to go to the knife section and gaga over the knives. My dad asked me one time why, and I told him, I said, because for some reason I feel you can do just about anything if you had a good knife. And he looked at me and said, you're right. I said, where'd you learn that at? I said, I don't know. It's just a feeling, it's a feeling I get when I look to the west. Anyway, so that was the honest to God truth. I was kind of more attracted to the double knife sets. You had a hunting knife, and then you had in the bottom of the sheath another little sheath that had like a pocket knife in it, or a knife and a smaller knife. I was more drawn to them, but they were like 14, 15 bucks, and there was only two places around here to buy knives, and I couldn't get to either one of them as a kid. So, and my dad didn't believe in that kind of stuff, so he wouldn't take me to buy them. So anyhow, through the ages as I got older, like I said, I don't remember very many. I remember a lot of pocket knives. I don't remember very many fixed blades, like Barlow's, Granddaddy Barlow's, the bigger ones, two-blade hunter type knives. The good-sized Stockmans and jackknives. Years ago, one of them used to make a Stockman. It was a 5-inch. It was a big Stockman. I remember seeing a lot of them around because they had a good-sized blade. But guys around here that hunted, maybe that's why. Because we did a lot of small game hunting. I hunted with the family for deer, so I didn't really get out there to see that many hunters. Maybe that's why. Because everybody was using their big blades to hunt with. Where small game for rabbits and stuff like that, they carried pocket knives. Anyway, I did see a lot of Imperial, like Granddaddy Barlow's, Stockman, stuff like that people cleaned their game with. And honest to God, the Boy Scout knives. Now, what we used to call a Boy Scout knife wasn't like a Camp King. It was these big honking things that sat on a case on your belt, and it was like a Swiss champ of the Japanese knives. It had all kind of stuff: knife and fork and spoon, scissors, can openers, bottle openers, a bail to hang it on. It was a piece of work, and unfortunately I don't have one, which I think about getting one soon. But they came in all sizes too. You had little Imperials were about this big, and then everybody made one. K-bar, case, everybody made a hobo knife. That's what it was called, a hobo knife. And hey, I tell you what, I had one, a little Imperial one. It was phenomenal for camping. You didn't have to worry about carrying utensils with you. Just dropped into your cook system, and that was it. So now, back in that era, we didn't. I mean, I was a scout. I went up to Eagle Scout and kind of got kibosh from there. But we weren't taught the baton sticks. We weren't taught. We were taught a one-stick fire, and I'll explain how we did that in another second here. We were taught one-stick fires. We were taught different fire lays and whatnot, but that was with your Camp King, the Boy Scout knife. If you were lucky, you had like a charade had a fixed blade Boy Scout knife, and I think Colonial did too, but I'm not quite sure. No, it was Camelius and charade, yes. If you were lucky enough and you had one of them, well then you were styling, but we weren't lucky enough. And how they taught us to do one-stick fires with feather sticks. You take about a 1-inch tree or stick that's fairly straight, about 2 foot long, and you keep shaving that stick down until you had a bunch of feathers. Then you lit that up with a match. There was no ferro rods. There was, but we didn't have them here. They were like a military type thing at the time. So you lit it with a match. Or you lit it with a Zippo lighter. And that was your one-stick fire. We did do flint and steel fires. And again, you gathered up your tinder, you made feather sticks, 5 or 6 feather sticks, and that's what you started your fire with. There was no beating on a knife. And if they ever caught you beating on, like chopping, I was chopping a tree down one time with a knife. I damn near got my head kicked in from the scout leader. Not only for chopping the tree, but, what are you doing with that knife? That's your last name. So that's the way things were where I grew up. I can't say across America, but where I grew up. And every now and then you'd spot, somebody would have a Bowie knife, because back in them days, the spaghetti westerns were still really popular, and everybody, they liked mountain men and Bowie knives, and so every now and then you catch somebody with a Bowie knife, and I was just enamored. My one buddy's dad bought one at a flea market for like $8, and he used to show it to me all the time. He had it hanging on his wall. It was a case presentation Bowie, and boy, I used to go over to his house and I just sit there go, I think at the time they were $75 or something like that, but who had the money? So there's a little bit of history on the knives and stuff like when I was a kid. If you went camping, you went hunting, we called it not survival, we called it camping, exploring sometimes if you were going long distances. Then all of a sudden, the Rambo craze hit. All the hollow handle knives came out and stuff, and some of them were good, some of them were but then all of a sudden camping and stuff turned to eastern woodland survival. And you had desert, southwest survival, the north, everybody was a survivalist. No, not really. We were just campers. We were learning how to survive off the land, which is what I guess you could call fieldcraft or woodsmanship skills. So even in the 80s and 70s, we were survivaling, but we weren't doing anything that a good woodman wouldn't know. How to build shelters, how to use the woods to your advantage, how to hunt, fish, stuff like that. Appropriately. And we respected the land we were on, and we respected the things we were doing with that land. Like, you don't cut down trees, you pick them up off the ground. There's enough of them laying around. Nobody carried saws and sawed up their wood. They burned it. Or they went home and they brought it in with chainsaws and carried it to the campsite. You picked it up off the ground, you broke it in pieces, you threw it on the fire in pieces. If you couldn't break it, you burned it in half. There was no such thing as a ferro rod and carrying extra tinder and this, that, and the other thing. If you had a flint and steel kit, yes, we knew what char cloth was. Then we got introduced by a guy by the name of Mitch. He was a reenactor, mountain man reenactor. He showed us how to make rub cloth, but we weren't allowed to play with black powder then, so he used to make rub cloth for us. What that is, you rub black powder into a piece of cloth till it's like caked on there. When you hit it with a ferro rod, the powder ignites, and it's like a flammable char cloth. And anyway, so that's what we had. If you were going to do anything besides matches, you had a flint and steel kit, which was a Boy Scout thing anyway. They had match safes that you put maybe 15, 20 strike anywhere matches in, and on the side of the match safe was a rough piece that struck the match. Well, you struck it off your zipper, your jeans, or whatever. As far as like fishing kits and stuff, there was no fishing kits back in them days. You made your own. What do you need to go fishing? Well, there's fishing line, hooks, sinkers. Okay. Then you made your own, and you used some kind of little capsule or whatever. The best thing I ever found is we used to use duct tape. You'd stick the line, the hooks, the sinkers, everything right in the gluey side of a duct tape, fold the other side over, and it created its own little pocket of fishing kit. Now, my dad's idea of fishing kit, he used to take a pack of matches, just store-bought matches. He'd wrap fishing line around it, maybe 8, 10 feet of it, a couple of hooks inside of it, a couple of sinkers, and that was his fishing kit. That was his whole survival kit. He used to carry that and a knife. So, then, he had improvised stuff like shotgun shells. You take a 20 gauge and a 12 gauge shotgun shell, and they'll slide into each other. And you made match cases out of that. Same thing with bullets, and if I'm not mistaken, it was a 38 shell over the top of a 30-30 cut. You cut the neck off of a 30-30, you slipped a 38 over the top. That was a match safe, if I remember right. But we had match safes to carry strike anywhere matches in. Or you carried book matches, which is just little books you get in the store for lighting cigarettes and stuff. And then, Bic lighters came out, and they were the rage. I loved Bic lighters. And then I got old enough to buy a Zippo, and I loved Zippo, but they have their shortcomings. Like one night I was out in the woods, and I forgot to fill my lighter, and I ran out of fluid. So I was kind of stuck out there on a very dark night. Luckily, I had matches in the knife I was carrying. And there's some references. I have some books here that it references different knife, or not different knife, but different kits. And the stuff that they're carrying 50 years ago is not much different than what we carry now, to be honest with you. The food's a little different because they didn't really have freeze-dried food back in them days. They were just canned foods and stuff. But the food's a little different. But that's about it. You still had, your normal cooking pots. Most guys used canteen cups back them days. But you had your cooking pots and this stove and that stove. Espen stoves were popular. Sterno stoves. When I was in the Boy Scouts, we had a couple of guys had these Sterno stoves. They were just a pressed out tin stove, and you put the can of Sterno in there and put your pot on top. They worked pretty good. It took a while, but they did work. So on and so forth, and advancing in through the 80s, you started to see a lot of knives around then, a lot of different knives. It was, who came out? Valor came out that time, Life Knife, Wilderness Explorer came out. A lot of knives came out of Seikei, Japan, but of course, Buck Knives and all them guys are out then. United Cutlery came out then. And I believe Timberwolf was out then. But you've seen a lot of off brands come, and then they started making Chinese knives. And personally, for me, I had carbon growing up, and I'll take stainless steel any day over carbons for being out in the woods with. That's just my opinion. Okay. So basically, that's really it, unless I want to run this into like a part 2. Let's do that. I'll be right back.